Excellencies, distinguished delegates, you are kindly invited to take your seats. The proceedings are about to begin.
Your Excellency, Serdar Berdimuhamedov, President of Turkmenistan, distinguished heads of state and government, Your Excellency Philemon Yang, President of the General Assembly, Your Excellency Lok Bahadur Tapa, President of the Economic and Social Council, Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished participants, I declare open the third United Nations Conference on Landlocked Developing Countries, LLDC3, and call to order its first plenary meeting. In accordance to Rule 17 of its provisional rules of procedure, as contained in document S/Conf 2025/2, I will serve as temporary President of the Conference until the election of the President. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you, and I look forward to a successful and productive conference. I now invite the conference to proceed with the election of the President. It is my understanding that there is general agreement to elect His Excellency Serdar Berdimuhamedov, President of Turkmenistan, as President of the Conference. May I take it that the Conference wishes to proceed with this election by acclamation? It's so decided. I congratulate His Excellency Serdar Berdimuhamedov, and I invite him to take his seat at the podium to take over the proceedings of the conference. And I request protocol to escort His Excellency.
Distinguished heads of state and government, Your Excellency, Secretary-General of the United Nations, António Guterres, Your Excellency, President of the 79th session of the General Assembly, Philemon Yang, Your Excellency, President of the Economic and Social Council, Lok Bahadur Tapa, Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished participants, it is an honor and a privilege for me to have been elected President of the Third United Nations Conference on Landlocked Developing Countries. Allow me now to deliver some introductory remarks as president of the conference. Your Excellencies, esteemed Secretary-General of the United Nations, Mr. António Guterres, esteemed President of the UN General Assembly, Mr. Philemon Yang, esteemed President of the United Nations Economic and Social Council, Mr. Lok Bahadur Tapa, distinguished heads of state, heads of government, international organizations, heads and members of delegations, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of Turkmenistan, I would like to most warmly and sincerely welcome you and express my gratitude for participating in the third United Nations Conference on Landlocked Developing Countries. This conference is undoubtedly directly relevant for the major pressing issues of global development, the implementation of key United Nations programs, in particular the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and alignment with the strategic guidelines of the Pact for the Future. From this high rostrum, I address the esteemed Secretary-General of the United Nations, Mr. António Guterres, and all heads and governments of UN member states with words of appreciation for their attention to our forum and their firm commitment to the comprehensive development of landlocked developing countries. The theme of our conference has global significance. It encompasses key dimensions of international activity: humanitarian, economic, social, environmental, and other areas. First and foremost, I would like to emphasize the importance of humanitarian issues. The state policy of Turkmenistan is focused on the people and the people's needs and demands. It is focused on the development of the individual, intellectual, and creative potential, spiritual and physical health, as well as protecting and upholding people's legitimate rights and interests. The state for the people is not just our motto. It is the essence and the defining vector of Turkmenistan's domestic policy and social life. It is the foundation of our country's foreign policy and international activities. The fundamental principle of Turkmenistan's policy is ensuring high social standards and quality of life for its people. That is why the lion's share of the state's budget is allocated to implementing social programs, in particular the construction of housing, healthcare facilities, educational facilities, as well as support for families, mothers, children, youth, older persons, persons with disabilities, and other groups. I would like to specifically mention medicine and access to quality health care. This is a matter of principal importance, of paramount importance, that goes far beyond national boundaries. As a social state, Turkmenistan has accumulated significant experience in this area, and we stand ready to share this experience with all countries, as well as establish broad cooperation with international bodies. Today, from this rostrum at this forum, I would like to propose an initiative that I would formulate as global medicine of the future, solidarity and cooperation. The recent global pandemic, as well as today's issues, diseases, and epidemics in various parts of the world, demonstrate that the concepts of solidarity and mutual support on a planetary scale are becoming synonymous with achieving human health goals and upholding the fundamental right to health and healthcare. This initiative involves the launch of systemic mechanisms for international medical diplomacy under the auspices of the United Nations. In our view, it is the United Nations, its specialized agencies, programs, funds, and institutions that should play the lead role in coordinating and supporting this work. Turkmenistan's proposal of this initiative at this forum is no coincidence. It is based on clear logic. A lack of access to the sea is a major obstacle to the timely delivery of medical aid, the supply of medicines and medical equipment, as well as carrying out necessary preventative measures and the functioning of the entire medical infrastructure as a whole. Our country is ready to present its ideas on the practical implementation of this initiative and to begin working on the initiative with the relevant entities of the United Nations. Distinguished participants, the development of a sustainable communication system is a pressing issue for landlocked developing countries. As is well known, Turkmenistan was one of the initiators of establishing a contemporary platform for international dialogue in this key area. In this regard, allow me to mention the successful first global UN conference on sustainable transport held in Ashgabat in 2016, as well as the ministerial meeting on transport for landlocked developing countries, which took place in our country in 2022. Turkmenistan's targeted efforts have resulted in the adoption of 6 UN General Assembly resolutions in recent years on the issue of the development of international transport cooperation, which were put forward by our government. In the context of implementing the SDGs, Turkmenistan believes in the need to accelerate the process of ensuring transport connectivity, as well as to bring fresh ideas and momentum to this process. In connection with this, last year at the World Government Summit in Dubai, Turkmenistan proposed creating a new partnership format, namely a global atlas of sustainable transport connectivity. I invite all forum participants to carefully consider this initiative. I am convinced that its implementation will significantly contribute to integrating landlocked developing countries into global transportation and logistics networks. A crucial aspect in this regard is the environmental safety of transport routes in the context of the Green Agenda. We see the use of modern technologies as a primary solution to this issue. Turkmenistan also attaches high importance to the environmental aspects of other areas, including the energy sector. The concept of green energy today is a mandatory and fundamental aspect of our work in the energy sector, both domestically as well as internationally. In this area, we act in strict accordance with international acts adopted within the UN framework. All participants in the energy triad, producers, transit countries, and consumers, must strictly comply with international environmental standards and agreements on environmental protection and climate change. At the same time, our country calls for stepping up practical efforts in the use of renewable energy sources. We stand ready to participate in the development of hydrogen energy. This requires clear joint plans and cooperation algorithms. In this context, we have put forward an initiative to create a global program for the transition to hydrogen energy for the period 2030 through 2040. Therefore, starting next year, we propose to begin discussing the modalities for developing such a program within the United Nations. Overall, we believe that all economic activity needs to be aligned with environmental standards. The essence of our environmental policy is to tune the economic system in such a way that the production sector becomes not a rival of nature, but rather its ally and support. In this regard, we draw attention to Turkmenistan's proposal to develop a global framework program for the transition to a circular economy. I stress the importance of the climate agenda and believe it is necessary to note the effectiveness of the practical implementation of the provisions of the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, which was clearly demonstrated at recent conferences of the parties. It is noteworthy that these conferences have been developing technological, legal, and economic foundations for a new global climate agenda in which the role of landlocked developing countries must be a dignified and meaningful one. Turkmenistan supports this process and is fully involved in it, both constructively and creatively. For instance, the climate agenda of landlocked countries is closely linked to such issues as the preservation of the Caspian Sea and saving the RLC. For a number of states participating in this forum, the Caspian Sea is the most vital waterway connecting them to the global ocean, and I am confident that we're all interested in the environmental well-being of this water body, which directly impacts its economic and transportation functions. The problem of the Caspian Sea thus goes far beyond regional and even continental boundaries. Therefore, at the 78th session of the General Assembly, our country presented the Caspian Environmental Initiative as an international platform for substantive expert dialogue on a broad range of issues related to the environmental protection of the Caspian Sea, and addressing a number of urgent environmental issues, the most pressing of which today is lower sea levels. Equally significant is the issue of saving the RLC. Turkmenistan proposes developing a special UN program for the RLC basin, as well as making the RLC issue a standalone area of activity within the United Nations. In this context, a solid foundation for effective international partnership in this area is provided by two General Assembly resolutions initiated by our country: cooperation between the United Nations and the International Fund for Saving the RLC, and the resolution of the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, entitled Consideration of the Modalities for the Establishment of a United Nations Special Program for the RLC Basin. I'm confident that the implementation of these two vital documents will become a major driving factor for all international efforts in the area of the RLC issue. It is also worth noting overall cooperation on water issues as an important part of global processes. It will largely determine future prospects for ensuring stability, development, and prosperity on the planet. An essential aspect here is the sustainable use and equitable distribution of water resources. Turkmenistan has always firmly and consistently upheld the importance of equal and equitable access to water as a natural and fundamental right of every human being. Therefore, in our deep conviction, addressing the entire range of water-related issues must be based on three fundamental principles: compliance with international law, mutual consideration of interests, and the involvement of international organizations, first and foremost, the UN. Distinguished participants, dear friends, the year 2025 has been declared by the General Assembly at Turkmenistan's initiative as the International Year of Peace and Trust. This year, together with the international community, our country is also celebrating a historic milestone, the 30th anniversary of the international recognition of the neutrality of Turkmenistan. It is symbolic that both of these events coincide with the 80th anniversary of the United Nations. Peace, trust, neutrality. For us, these concepts are inextricably linked. They define the meaning and the profound essence of Turkmenistan's policy. They guide our actions and initiatives on the international stage and reflect the very philosophy of our foreign policy, whose priority has been and remains strategic partnership with the United Nations. This fully applies to today's forum. Together with the United Nations, with our friends and like-minded partners from dozens of countries and authoritative international organizations, here in Turkmenistan, we are discussing the problems of landlocked developing countries and ways to address them. We're doing so from a position of constructiveness and equality, mutual respect, and consideration of interests, care for our peoples, for their present and future. I am convinced that we are on the right path and we will succeed together. I would like to once again thank all delegations and distinguished guests for their active participation, constructive spirit, and readiness to work together with Turkmenistan towards the achievement of development goals, progress, and prosperity for our countries and for all of humanity. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you a productive conference. Thank you very much. The conference shall now hear opening statements in accordance with the organization of work of the conference. I first invite His Excellency António Guterres, Secretary-General of the United Nations, to address the conference.
Your Excellency, President Serdar Berdimuhamedov, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I thank the government and people of Turkmenistan for your warm welcome and leadership in hosting this important conference. We gather today to reaffirm a fundamental truth: geography should never define destiny. Yet, for the 32 landlocked developing countries across Africa, Asia, Europe, and South America, geography too often limits development opportunities and entrenches inequality. Your countries face daunting challenges: steep barriers to trade, high transport costs, and limited access to global markets. Many remain highly vulnerable, relying on raw commodity exports, exposed to volatile international prices, and constrained by narrow economic bases. Meanwhile, debt burdens are rising to dangerous and unsustainable levels, and 1/3 of LLDCs are grappling with vulnerability, insecurity, or conflict. Despite representing 7% of the world's population, LLDCs account for just over 1% of the global economy and trade, a stark example of deep inequalities that perpetuate marginalization. These inequalities are not inevitable. They are the result of an unfair global and economic financial architecture, unfit for the realities of today's interconnected world, compounded by systemic neglect, structural barriers, and in many cases, the legacy of a colonial past. Recent shocks, from COVID-19 pandemic to climate disasters, supply chain disruptions, conflicts, and geopolitical tensions, have deepened the divide, pushing many LLDCs further away from achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. But this conference is not about obstacles. It is about solutions. It is about launching a new decade of ambition through the Awaza Programme of Action and its deliverables, and fully unlocking the development potential of landlocked developing countries. The United Nations is proud to stand with you in this effort. Allow me to outline 4 essential priorities for collective action in the decade ahead. First, we must accelerate structural transformation and economic diversification. LLDCs possess extraordinary potential, from natural resources to human capital. Yet this potential remains largely untapped, constrained by limited funding and market access. We need bold and sustainable investments in value-added industries, local innovation, and inclusive growth that reaches every community across regions and generations. Digital transformation must be central to this effort. It can help LLDCs overcome physical barriers and connect to global markets. Digital tools can also deepen connectivity between communities, preserving indigenous knowledge, celebrating cultural heritage, and strengthening linguistic and educational exchanges across borders. And with the right support, LLDCs can leverage artificial intelligence to strengthen early warning systems, expand precision farming, enable smart logistics, and tailor solutions in health, education, and public services. But today, the digital divide is stark. Many people in LLDCs remain offline, with women and rural communities especially excluded. We must urgently close these gaps by expanding digital infrastructure, boosting digital literacy, and ensuring affordable access for all. The Global Digital Compact offers a roadmap. We need strong partnerships, particularly with the private sector, to scale innovation, transfer technologies, and connect some of the world's most isolated populations. I will soon present a report on innovative voluntary financing options to support AI capacity building in developing countries. And we must also support LLDCs in harnessing e-commerce, mobile banking, and digital services to unlock jobs, boost revenues, and empower youth. Second, we must strengthen trade, transit, and regional connectivity. Your countries are bound by deep human connections, shared languages, cultural heritage, and kinship ties that transcend borders and offer a powerful foundation for regional cooperation. Yet, fragmented logistics, border delays, inadequate transport infrastructure, high transport costs keep your countries on the margins of the global economy. We must address both the hardware and software of connectivity. That means simplifying cross-border procedures, harmonizing standards, and strengthening legal frameworks for seamless trade and transit. It means investing in physical infrastructure, from resilient transport corridors to cross-border energy interconnections, expanded air connectivity, and smart logistics platforms. LLDCs must be fully integrated into regional and global value chains, transforming their role from suppliers of raw materials to creators of high-value products. And we must reform the global trade system to better reflect your realities, challenges, and ambitions. We must deepen connections with transit countries through joint planning, mutual benefit, and shared infrastructure, including traditional trade routes and cross-border community ties. Multilateral development banks must prioritize LLDCs with concessional funding in their regional transport and trade lending portfolios, rapidly scaling support for green cross-border investments. When LLDCs are connected, entire regions can prosper. Third, we must strengthen climate action. LLDCs contribute less than 3% of global greenhouse gas emissions, but suffer disproportionately and unjustly from climate impacts. From desertification in the Sahel to glacial retreat in mountainous regions, from extreme weather in Central Asia to changing rainfall patterns in South America, climate change is hitting landlocked countries hard. The combination of landlockedness and climate vulnerability creates compound risks that threaten development and, in some cases, survival. When climate disasters destroy critical infrastructure, entire economies can be severed from global markets overnight. We must double adaptation finance as promised, invest in early warning systems, and build resilient infrastructure that can withstand climate shocks. At the same time, the science is unequivocal. To avoid the worst impacts of climate change, we must keep the 1.5-degree goal within reach. COP30 later this year must be a decisive moment. G20 countries bear a particular responsibility to the scale of their emissions. They must lead by example, submitting national determined contributions that reflect the highest possible ambition. And LLDCs must have the means to act, from financing and technologies to partnerships that align climate action with national development goals. With the right support, the green transition can enable your countries to leapfrog to sustainable solutions, from renewable energy to electric mobility, creating new industries and decent jobs while protecting the planet.
Fourthly, we must mobilize funds and partnerships. None of our ambitions can be achieved without adequate, accessible, and affordable financing. And yet today, many LLDCs are trapped in a vicious cycle of debt and underinvestment. High borrowing costs due to perceived risks, limited access to international financial markets, and a debt level that diverts already meager development resources toward debt servicing. Access to affordable long-term financing remains inadequate, and the global financial system is failing those that are most in need. The Compromiso de Sevilla calls for a new era in financing, an equitable, inclusive era adapted to the realities of developing countries. We must implement these commitments with urgency and ambition. We must triple the lending capacity of multilateral development banks to increase concessional financing. We must reform the architecture of sovereign debt to better support sustainable development. We must mobilize private capital at a large scale for the public good. We must strengthen global tax cooperation to combat tax evasion and to curb illicit financial flows. And we must reform the governance of the international financial architecture to promote equity, transparency, and accountability, with more participation from developing countries. We must also mobilize concessional financing for climate urgently and at scale to allow landlocked developing countries to invest in resilient infrastructure, sustainable development, and inclusive growth. The Awaza Program of Action echoes the Compromiso de Sevilla. Together, they provide a concrete roadmap to transform promises into capital and capital into tangible progress. Excellencies, the success of landlocked developing countries is crucial to the success of the 2030 Agenda. We have the knowledge, we have the tools. Together, we can write a new chapter in the history of landlocked developing countries, built out of economic integration, resilience, and shared prosperity. Together, we can transform geography from the obstacle it is today into a bridge that links not only markets but also the peoples and cultures that impart their meaning to development. Let's seize this opportunity to forge a more prosperous, just, sustainable future for all. Thank you. I thank the Secretary-General of the United Nations for his statement. I now invite His Excellency Philemon Yang, President of the General Assembly, to address the conference.
Your Excellency, President of Turkmenistan, United Nations Secretary-General, President of the Economic and Social Council, Secretary-General of the Third United Nations Conference on Landlocked Developing Countries, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to be here at Awaza for this conference. We appreciate the warm welcome of our distinguished hosts, the government and the people of Turkmenistan. This is a milestone year. It is a year of years. We mark the 80th anniversary of the United Nations and celebrate the Charter's vision of peace, development, and human dignity for all. Those three pillars of the UN Charter are central to the mission of the United Nations. We also have entered the final 5 years of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The deadline we set for ourselves is fast approaching. We are getting close to 2030. This moment demands a renewed commitment to multilateralism and our foundational values, the bold action that benefits we, the peoples of the United Nations, and robust partnerships committed to ensuring that indeed no one is left behind as we pursue a more safe, just, and equitable world. Your Excellencies, the 32 landlocked developing countries have a population of 570 million people. Each of those countries has unique challenges. However, the aspirations of those 32 countries are universal, and the General Assembly has placed the needs of those countries high on its agenda. Just weeks ago, the General Assembly proclaimed the International Day for the Awareness of Landlocked Developing Countries' Special Development Needs and Challenges. This day will be observed annually on 6th August. I am glad to confirm that the General Assembly will continue to serve as the global platform to support landlocked developing countries. The General Assembly will do so through the rigorous annual monitoring of the Awaza Program of Action, the conduct of the high-level midterm review scheduled for 2029, and the commitment to dialogue and cooperation for which the Assembly is known. Dear friends, partnerships are at the heart of all these efforts. International cooperation is of decisive significance in our ambition to encourage multilateralism. Partnerships are a central feature of the Pact for the Future. From the Pact's very first Action 1, leaders recognize that 2030 agenda is universal, and that all developing countries, including those that are landlocked, require enhanced, tailored support to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. We must be reminded that the Sustainable Development Goals are here to stay. Development is a process that may have a short term, a medium term, and a long term. Development does not happen overnight. In the last Action 55 of the Pact for the Future, there is a pledge to strengthen partnerships to deliver on existing commitments and address new and emerging challenges. The Awaza Program of Action builds on this momentum created by the Pact for the Future. The Pact acknowledges the steep development hurdles landlocked developing countries face due to their structural and geographic constraints. Guided by the principles of the United Nations Charter, it calls for greater international and multilateral cooperation to reach the furthest behind. And the Pact demands decisive action to forge stronger partnerships, first among landlocked and transit countries, second across the United Nations system, and third with all relevant stakeholders. In the days ahead, let us move beyond words. The achievements we seek, such as regional agricultural research hubs and a dedicated infrastructure investment finance facility, are completely attainable. Such results must be pursued during the General Assembly's 80th session. Likewise, recommendations of freedom of transit must lead to real improvements on the ground in accordance with the applicable rules of international law. Such recommendations are fundamental to the freedom of transit in all parts of the world. The International Court of Justice advisory opinion in July 2025 adds strength to the goals set out in the Awaza Program of Action. The said advisory opinion is important, especially because landlocked developing countries are vulnerable to climate change. Now is the time to translate the 5 priority areas of the Awaza Program of Action into 193 national policies driven by a unified global effort. We all realize that this process, to succeed, it must be member state driven. This conference must send a clear message that geography does not determine destiny. Landlocked developing countries lack direct access to the sea. It is not the fault of those landlocked countries that they do not have access to the sea. But those countries must never lack access to opportunity, prosperity, or hope. The international community must make sure that such countries have access to opportunities, prosperity, hope, and dreams, and unlimited imaginations. The road to a brighter future does indeed run through partnership. Let us walk that road together with urgency, unity, and determination. Thank you very much.
I thank the President of the General Assembly for his statement. I now invite His Excellency Lok Bahadur Thapa, President of the Economic and Social Council, to address the conference.
Your Excellency, Mr. Sardar Bardi Mahadevo, President of the Turkmenistan and President of the Third United Nations Conference on Landlocked Developing Countries, Your Excellency, Mr. António Guterres, Secretary-General of the United Nations, Your Excellency, Mr. Philemon Yang, President of the United Nations General Assembly, Honorable Heads of State and Government, Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. It is an honor and privilege for me to join you in the opening ceremony of the Third United Nations Conference on Landlocked Developing Countries. Let me begin by expressing my sincere appreciation to the government of Turkmenistan for its generous hospitality and leadership in hosting this once-in-a-decade gathering in this beautiful city. Excellencies, this conference marks a pivotal moment for the 32 landlocked developing countries and a new decade of opportunity. It offers a renewed pathway toward inclusive growth and sustainable development for over 570 million people. As President of ECOSOC and the permanent representative of Nepal, a country that is both landlocked and least developed, I recognize the urgency of the task before us and the transformative opportunity this conference provides. LLDC continue to face structural challenges: lack of direct access to the sea, limited transport and communication infrastructure, long distance from major markets, and cumbersome transit procedures, among others. These geographical and structural vulnerabilities are compounded by multiple and interconnected global challenges, from the lingering impacts of the pandemic to geopolitical tensions and conflict to climate change and biodiversity loss. Despite rapid advances in science and technology, LLDC struggle to harness their benefits due to digital infrastructure gaps and high service costs. Many LLDCs are also burdened by distress, with debt servicing often exceeding the investment in health, education, and social protection. These challenges are not new, but they are growing in complexity, in scale, and in urgency. So our response must be timely, ambitious, adequate, and sustained. We must build on the progress achieved in the last decade, While the experience of the LLDC are diverse, our shared vision is clear: to turn structural barriers into pathways for inclusive, resilient, and sustainable development. Excellencies, the Awaza Program of Action is a bold, ambitious, actionable, and future-oriented blueprint, a blueprint to unlock the development potential of LLDCs and to strengthen coherence across national, regional, and global efforts. It aligns LLDC's priorities with 2030 agenda. It calls for urgent mobilization of collective resources, decisive actions, and innovative solutions. And to realize this vision and deliver meaningful progress, LLDC's priorities and their specific needs must be fully reflected in global development efforts and be implemented through targeted effort, support, integrated policy frameworks, and strengthen international cooperation. Regional cooperation is vital. LLDCs are key links in regional supply chains. Deepening collaborations with transit countries and regional organizations is a must to enhance connectivity, trade, and resilience. The upcoming UN Decade of Sustainable Transport presents a timely opportunity to make transport a true driver of sustainable development. I commend the Turkmenistan leadership in championing this agenda. We must prioritize the establishment of an infrastructure investment facilities for LLDCs with urgency in order to boost transit infrastructure and connectivity. Most importantly, financing must be mobilized at a scale, as LLDC face significant investment gap. In Asia and Pacific alone, transport infrastructure needs are estimated at 43 trillion by 2035, nearly 2% of the regional GDP. To bridge this gap, LLDCs need enhanced international cooperations. They need increased private investment. They need blended finance. They need greater access to concession resources, and they need sustainable development solutions. Similarly, climate finance must be scaled up with a special focus on adaptation to address LLDC growing vulnerabilities. Accelerated technology transfer is essential to help LLDCs to catch up digitalization and innovation. Equally, reliable data and robust national statistical systems are critical for effective planning, monitoring, and accountability. Together, let us turn the Awaza Program of Actions into a catalyst for inclusive, resilient, and sustainable development for all LLDCs. Excellencies, ECOSOC will support the effective implementation and follow-up of the Awaza Program of Actions by enhancing UN system coordination and accelerating SDG delivery where it is needed the most. Through renewed multilateralism and collective resolve, we can turn vulnerability into opportunity and promise into progress. Under the banner of delivering better, during Nepal's presidency, I will place special emphasis on the priorities of LLDCs: food security, connectivity, youth empowerment, climate resilience, and sustainable financing across ECOSOC's discussion and processes. This conference is not only about LLDCs, it is about our shared responsibility to build more equitable and resilient global system. Let us turn commitments into actions and action into impact. And let us ensure that no country is left behind because of geography. I thank you.
I thank the President of the Economic and Social Council for his statement. I now invite His Excellency Adilbek Kasım Aliyev, Chairman of the Cabinet of Ministers and Head of the Presidential Administration of the Kyrgyz Republic, to address the conference as the acting chair of the Group of Landlocked Developing Countries. Distinguished President, distinguished Secretary-General António Guterres, distinguished President of the General Assembly, Mr. Philemon Yang, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, on behalf of the delegation of the Kyrgyz Republic, I'd like to express the gratitude of the government of Kyrgyzstan to the brotherly people of Turkmenistan for the traditionally warm welcome and excellent organization of this conference. Allow me to convey the warm greetings of the President of the Kyrgyz Republic, Sadanoj Japarov, to all of the participants of this conference. It's a great honor for me to speak on behalf of the 32 landlocked developing countries, representing more than 570 million people on 4 continents. Despite the distance between us, the differences in cultures and language, and the level of socioeconomic development, our countries are experiencing similar key challenges such as geographic isolation, major transport and trade delays, and economic diversification, lack of investment and financing in digital divide, climate vulnerability, and the need to develop human capital. To resolve these problems, in 2001, with the help of the UN, we established the Group of Landlocked Developing Countries. Over the past few years, we adopted the Almaty and Vienna programs of action for landlocked developing countries. As we implement these programs, we have made great progress toward creating a normative and agreement framework for transit with neighbors. We've improved customs procedures and introduced digital technologies and improved international cooperation on logistics and transport issues. However, we must still acknowledge that we have not yet fully attained all of our goals and targets. Therefore, after 2 decades, it's become clear that despite the efforts we have made, landlocked developing countries still are being left on the sidelines of the global economy. We continue to face a number of interlinked crises, including military conflicts, global economic shocks, as well as a debt burden, climate instability, and growing inequality between states. All of these challenges are hardest hitting our countries. We have gathered here today on the banks of the Caspian Sea, not only to take stock of our joint actions, but also to define a joint path toward a more sustainable, interlinked, and inclusive future. In this regard, the Awaza Program of Action 2024-2034 is an opportunity to rectify our previous errors, to learn lessons from the previous decades, and to develop a sustainable development plan that will allow landlocked developing countries not only to overcome their geographic limitations, but also to become full-fledged participants in global growth. The new program of action will give us a strategic guideline and roadmap. The implementation of this program is not possible without collective responsibility and coordinated efforts between states and international financial institutions. We call on our partners to provide not only financial assistance, but also knowledge transfer, technical assistance, and investment guarantees. Of special importance is flexibility in financing in light of the specificities of landlocked countries. We are convinced that the answer to the challenges faced by LLDCs lies in unifying efforts at a global level and establishing new investment mechanisms. Ladies and gentlemen, over the past few years, Kyrgyzstan has been working to improve and enhance its international roadways. We also have a freedom of air policy and are building modern airports throughout the country to develop the air transport market. Starting in December of last year, we have been building railways connecting China, Kyrgyzstan, and Uzbekistan, which have allowed for major land corridors to be built between China, Middle East, Europe, and South Asia. For our country, this is strategically important to overcome our transport isolation, to reduce delays, and to mobilize international economic cooperation. Under the guidance of our President Japarov, our National Development Program for 2030 sets out a key priority, that is the transformation of the country into a regional logistical hub. We must also note the Casa 1000 project to export clean energy from Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan toward South Asia, which strengthens regional ties and energy sustainability. For us, developing transport and energy infrastructure, logistics, and the investment environment, these are not just national priorities, but key elements of our sustainable development strategy. Distinguished participants of the conference, ladies and gentlemen, in closing, I would like to wish all of our countries a successful transition from the status of being deprived of access to the sea toward the status of being linked and connected to the world through trade routes, over common values and common goals of sustainable development. We also reaffirm political will and believe that with real partnership and international assistance, we can transform our geographic position from an obstacle into a new corridor of opportunity on the path toward a sustainable future. Thank you. I thank the acting chair of the Group of Landlocked Developing Countries for his statement. I now invite His Excellency Zepp Schellhorn, State Secretary at the Federal Ministry for European and International Affairs of Austria, and the host country of the second UN Conference on Landlocked Developing Countries, to address the conference.
Mr. President Berdi Muhamedov, Mr. Secretary-General, President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates. Today it marks a significant milestone as we gather here today in beautiful Awaza. I extend my heartfelt gratitude to President Berdi Muhamedov, and the government of Turkmenistan for graciously hosting us. I also commend Under Secretary-General Rabat Fatima and her dedicated team for their tireless efforts. For Austria, as a landlocked country with 8 neighbors, and dedicated and proud host to United Nations headquarters and several other multilateral organizations, the work for an effective multilateralism and rules-based international order is part of our DNA. Austria also believes in multilateral cooperations, and therefore our support for LLDCs extended beyond more words. In 2025, we allocated nearly about 130 million euros of our bilateral official development assistance to ongoing projects in LLDCs. Most recently, last month, the Austrian government approved an additional 14 million euro humanitarian funding, primarily targeting LLDCs such as Ethiopia, Burkina Faso, Uganda, and Afghanistan. In 2014, Vienna hosted the second conference of Landlocked Developing Countries. During the 10 years of implementing the Vienna Program of Action, not only LLDCs have faced many additional challenges. Progressive climate crisis, the COVID pandemic, growing globally instability, and recurring wars present new obstacles to sustainable developments of developing and developed countries, but both landlocked and coastals. With the Awaza program of action, we have elaborated and adopted a robust agenda for the years to come, featuring ambitious goals, quantifiable targets, and clear actions. It engages all stakeholders, including LLDCs, transit countries, and development partners. It includes concrete initiatives such as a regional agriculture research hubs and finance facility for infrastructure investments, while reinforcing our commitment to human rights, good governance, and gender equality. We trust this program of action will lay the foundation for improving connectivity, diversifying economics, creating jobs, and enchaining the resilience to climate change, ultimately transforming the lives of people in LLDCs. Now our focus must shift to implementation. In our view, two aspects are particularly important: regional integration and bringing in the private sector, both of which have been major drivers of Austria's economic success. Achieving this in LLDCs requires ongoing commitment, collaboration, and innovative solutions to address the challenges ahead. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, let me assure that Austria will continue advocating for LLDCs. Supporting LLDCs has been and will remain a cornerstone of our national development cooperation. And we are proud to take this work forward together, included during our term on the UN Security Council 2027-28, if elected. We hope that we can count our support as fellow landlocked country. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of the host country of the Second United Nations Conference on Landlocked Developing Countries for his statement. I now invite Ms. Rabab Fatima, Secretary-General of the conference, to address the conference.
His Excellency Mr. Sardar Bardi Mohammadov, President of Turkmenistan and President of the Third United Nations Conference on Landlocked Developing Countries, His Excellency Mr. António Guterres, United Nations Secretary-General, His Excellency Mr. Philemon Yang, President of the UN General Assembly, His Excellency Mr. Lok Bahadur Thapa, President of ECOSOC, Honorable Heads of State and Government, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. It's truly an honor and privilege to address you today in my capacity as the Secretary-General of the LLDC3 conference. Allow me to begin by expressing my deep gratitude to the government and people of Turkmenistan for their outstanding commitment and leadership in hosting this important conference. The Awaza Program of Action is a bold and ambitious blueprint to transform the development landscape for the 32 landlocked developing countries for the next decade. And I congratulate you all on its historic adoption. For too long, LLDCs have been defined by the barriers of geography, remoteness, inaccessibility, and by borders that do not open to the sea. But that is only part of the story. LLDCs may be landlocked, but they are not opportunity locked. And as we have heard repeatedly, geography must not dictate their destiny. These are countries rich in resources, resilience, and ambition. The theme of this conference, Driving Progress Through Partnerships, captures our collective resolve to unlock that potential. It underscores a new era of collaboration where LLDCs are not seen as isolated or constrained, but as fully integrated partners in the global economy. The Awaza Program of Action provides the tools to unlock the full potentials of LLDCs and turn their structural challenges into transformative opportunities. And I'm pleased to report to you, Excellencies, that the implementation of the Program of Action has begun. We arrive in Awaza with momentum on our side. We have put together a UN system-wide roadmap and monitoring framework with clear milestones and outcomes comprising over 320 concrete projects, programs, and activities. And over the course of the week, we will see here the launch of many new partnerships and initiatives that will bring fresh momentum to its implementation. As we take this process forward, allow me to highlight 3 strategic priorities that will guide our work in Awaza and beyond. First, bridging the infrastructure and connectivity gap remains our top priority. LLDCs face an infrastructure financing shortfall of over $500 billion. Goods take 42 days to enter and 37 days to exit their borders. Paved road density stands at just 12% of the global average. Internet access is only 39%. To address these constraints, the Awaza Program of Action proposes a new infrastructure investment finance facility. This new initiative will mobilize capital at scale to plug the gaps and pave the roads. This conference also features, for the first time, a dedicated forum on physical and digital connectivity, bringing together all stakeholders to shape new and innovative solutions. Second, it would be imperative to accelerate economic transformation and growth. LLDCs account for just 0.8% of global services exports and 0.3% of manufactured goods trade. Logistic costs are, on average, 63% higher than in transit countries. These disadvantages must be tackled head-on. Freedom of transit for LLDCs must be ensured, not just in principle, but in practice, to overcome the heavy cost of being landlocked. To this end, we are advancing the proposal for a high-level panel of the UN Secretary-General on freedom of transit to turn international provisions into real-world pathways. We are supporting the LLDC group's call for a dedicated work program within the multilateral trading system. We are also promoting Awaza Program of Action's proposal to establish regional agricultural research hubs to enhance food security and regional cooperation. 2 member states have already expressed interest in hosting them. This is a clear demonstration of the support to this important deliverable. Thirdly, climate resilience must be critical to the LLDC's development agenda. Despite contributing the least to global emissions, LLDCs disproportionately suffer from climate shocks, absorbing, for instance, 18% of global drought and landslide impacts. For the first time, climate action and resilience form a dedicated priority area of the LLDC Program of Action. With our support, the LLDC group has established a dedicated negotiating group under UNFCCC. This will ensure that their voices are heard and their unique vulnerabilities addressed in global climate discourse. Excellencies, the Program of Action is only as effective as its implementation. We are launching here in Awaza the National Mainstreaming Guidelines and Toolkit to support the integration of the Awaza Program of Action into national plans and budgets. At the regional level, we will work with the UN regional commissions, development banks, sub-regional platforms to enhance transit corridors, improve resilience, and mobilize catalytic investments. These efforts will be anchored by strengthened national focal points and close engagement with the United Nations resident coordinators. Importantly, the Awaza Program of Action is fully aligned with the 2030 Agenda and the Pact for the Future. But implementation requires more than policy alignment. It demands inclusivity and ownership. Therefore, for the first time, the LLDC3 features dedicated platforms for the civil society, the private sector, youth, women leaders, parliamentarians, and South-South partners. This is a whole-of-society approach in action. In that spirit, I'm pleased to announce that we launched this afternoon the Global Business Network for the LLDCs, a major milestone in integrating the private sector as a key partner in their sustainable development. Excellencies, the legacy of this conference will not be measured in words, but by the real and lasting changes that we deliver on the ground. In the roads we build, in the trade corridors we open, in the digital divide that we close, and in the resilience that we build. Let us seize this moment with ambition, unity, and with a great sense of purpose. Let us chart a new path where land-linked is not just a phrase, but a way of life. The UN Secretary-General has pledged to place the LLDCs high on the UN's agenda. We will make every effort that the next decade is a decade of action and transformation for the LLDCs. I thank you.
I thank the Secretary-General of the conference for her statement. Distinguished heads of state and government, ministers, excellencies, we have heard the last speaker for the opening segment of the conference.